Okay, well, kind of briefly, this is spanning like 12 years, say. So it started out with a visit to impact my decisions, or a decision to impact my visit, sorry. So my visits were cut without following procedural protocol, without meeting the threshold that's required. Because visitation is an entitlement in there, subject to only the limits that are prescribed by the Act and regulations. But a lot of the management in there, I'll give you a quote from one of them. I went in to talk to him about human rights and visits and the statutory procedure. He's like, before you get going, don't tell me about the law. I just wrote it this morning. And that was the end of the conversation. So from getting my visits cut, and this was one of the times when I was mentioning earlier my daughter got barred. So it's a Christmas social, one time of the year. We get to do it 4 times a year. Families can come in, and instead of having a 3-hour visit, we have a 5-hour visit. They get to go to the yard and we can play games, and they have dinner with us, and we would contribute money from our $5 a day and buy gifts for the kids and stuff like that. Santa would come and see them there, all that kind of stuff. So she got there with my mom, and they were barred and, you know, hostily ejected and accused of trespassing and threatened with being arrested. So she went home crying, and they refused to sort it out until I got the correctional investigator involved. That was, you know, a month after Christmas by the time they got out there, and so it was too late to see them. The opportunity was missed, but so I decided to get into the inmate committee as a representational group that represents the entire population, bringing concerns and needs to the management from the population. And then from there I got involved in the Lifers group, the Native Brotherhood, which are basically the same type of thing, representative bodies for those particular interest groups. I ended up taking some training later through Rhodes College to become a peer counselor, to kind of help people deal with the anguish and the torment of that environment. And sitting and talking with these guys, I couldn't help but feel compassion, and I wanted to do something, and I couldn't do anything as a counselor. I'm just there to help them learn to be aware of and manage their feelings. So we decided, and it was around the same time that Legal Services Society of BC cut back some of their funding, so access to actual legal representation was diminishing in the province. And so we came up with the idea, it's like, okay, well, why don't we train some lifers who are here for a long time in the law and policy of corrections, and they can kind of mediate and advocate and conciliate for their peers. Because, I mean, that's another thing I wanted to mention earlier, is like one of the most dehumanizing things in there. Prisoners are one of the least educated classes in the country, and yet I don't know if you've been through the corrections website, but there are literally reams and reams and reams of policy written by university educated people who've created their own particular jargon to, you know, protect their profession. And so how are these illiterate and substance afflicted and, you know, other emotional and mental and psychological and psychiatric challenged individuals to deal with that in the short amount of time they're there? They have no hope in hell of learning what the policy means, how it applies to them, what their rights and responsibilities are. All they know is that something feels wrong. They feel treated unfairly, they get upset, they lash out, they go to the hole. So for me, watching that happen over and over and over was terrible. So we started that advocacy program, and we ran that for a while. And I actually, created a document. It's become the national standard for doing threat risk assessments for visitors coming into the institution when they are indicated on by the drug dog or the ion scanner. And it was designed to be an educational tool and also protect the procedural safeguards and make sure that, you know, sure, the people that are smuggling contraband in are going to get stopped. There will be effective interdiction, but you're not going to keep turning out the people that are, you know, not causing problems. Because 70–80% of the people that get turned away have nothing to do with the drug trade. More drugs are brought into there by the staff than by visitors. That's a plain fact of life. But, so I mean, we've got this document. They gutted some of the more substantial elements in the document, but it's a step in the right direction. So I mean, we did things like that. We created the Lifers kitchen I was mentioning earlier. I didn't finish it. So we set up this kitchen. Took 5 years from the day we put the proposal in to get it approved. 5 years. like nobody but a lifer is gonna have the time to sit there and live through that kind of, policy development, right? So 5 years to get it approved, and then another 9 months to get the first food order in and the first actual dinner on the table, so that these guys who are isolated and lonely and have nobody to communicate with could sit down and have, a feeling of social activity. And it didn't last long. I mean, the security were in there constantly claiming there was stuff missing and, worried and shutting it down and stuff. So it didn't last very long. But we were involved also in a national advisory committee for access to computers. The CSE decided to put a moratorium on computer access because they claimed they couldn't keep up with evolving technology, and there was no way to keep things secure, and they were making allegations like, well, the power of gaming systems these days, we let them have PS3s, they can just hack into the internet and they'll send their victims hate mail. I'm like, where do you guys come up with this stuff? Like, seriously. So, I mean, we sat for 2 years on this committee. We designed a computer that would answer all their security concerns, transparent case, limited storage and data functionality, and even their IT department thought it was okay. They finally said okay, because for the first year they wouldn't even tell us what their concerns were. We knew what they were, so we went ahead and addressed them anyways. We had this document ready within a month, and 2 years later they finally adopted that document as the policy to move forward with, and then the Conservatives got elected in, and they're like, oops, duck and cover. Nobody wants to talk about rehabilitation or reform while the Conservatives are in there, right? So it went on the shelf and gathered dust. But yeah, that's kind of some of the stuff we did. Trying to get access to education. Like, it took me a year of grievances and fighting with the staff there, not physically or anything, but lobbying, nagging, bitching, complaining, and formal grievances to be allowed to enter into a paralegal program through correspondence and pay for it myself. Like a year of grievances all the way to Ottawa. And you know what they said to me? They said, well, you know what? Educating you in the law will only increase your criminality.
Yeah, sure.
It sounds like the common denominator there is, like, in all your pursuits is just like trying to find some sense of like autonomy, be able to do things for yourself, like by yourself. I think the most powerful thing you brought up is when you mentioned the point about how, like, us as criminologists, right, like we are the ones who get to define and label what's going on in a closed institution that we know nothing about. Meanwhile, the people who do know the most about it, the people who are living the experiences, are the ones who are silenced, right? Like, I think that's like the most moving point for me to hear that from you. Like, I can't really imagine. Do you guys have like ideas on like how you can expand on that? Like, how can you stop just like one group from being able to label a whole nother, right? Like, we are in the position of power here.
Well, I think both of you guys mentioned Foucault and the development of the justice system from, like, the days of like, let's pull people apart with horses and on the public square, how that evolved into the prison, which is the closed thing. Now, back in the days of torture, there was the advantage in that it was public view, everybody could see what was going on, and everybody could, protest against that. Whereas the prison system was evolved to maybe manage the barbarity, but at the same time it came with the flaw that it was not open to public view, and so the public couldn't view it and check it out, because in a sense the public is the boss, so the boss can't check in on the work of the employee, which would be the prison. And so I think one way to at least address some of the problems with the system is to perhaps create a third generation of punishment where instead of the prison being a closed system, it's a transparent system. So, and of course, cracking down, purging the heavy security culture, or at least making it. We have security concerns, but don't having the guards say we have security concerns, but we say like, okay, well, please explain. Like, we don't necessarily give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, if they're proven right, then like, fine. But they like everyone else, like every other government department, should have to explain should have to explain itself to the public who is their benefactor.
I guess what I would say to that is, yeah, there should be a third way. But the question is, yes, perhaps jails are understood to be an alternative or reform for cruel and unusual punishment, and torture and public spectacle. But it still doesn't address the question, and you want to reform them, maybe it doesn't address the question, well, why is someone found guilty and then put into jail? Or one is, why and how is one found guilty and then pulled apart by horses? So it seems like those are later questions, that maybe even the earlier question is the harder question to answer. You know, why are we prosecuting these people, and for what reasons, and what would be the purpose of that system? So that's the larger question.